Be a legendary leader. Fireground failures are leadership failures. Learn the skills to be a legendary leader in the firehouse and on the fireground. Go to firegroundcompany.com.
On today's episode of the Fireground Company podcast, we conclude our three-part series with 4 more tips for new leaders from Jocko Willink.
The Fireground Company podcast.
Here we go.
Do I need to do the clap?
Oh, I guess so, yeah. I mean, it can't hurt.
Okay, I will do the clap. I kind of like it now. It's kind of funny.
All right. Okay, so today we're bringing home our little series that we did. It's a part of Jocko Willink's book. The book is called Leadership Strategy and Tactics Field Manual. And if for some reason you're stumbling upon this episode first before the other ones, this is a 3-part series. There's 12 tips that he lays out that are really good. And we've broken them down into 4 tips per episode. So this is the last one of the series. And so we're going to take on the last 4 tips that Jocko Willink has, and we're going to break them down a little bit and apply them to the fire service because it's they're really good tips to keep in your pocket. And you were talking before about how you kind of have to figure out how to incorporate these into your leadership strategy without being rigid about it. It doesn't mean that this is exactly a how-to, so did you want to say something real quick about, just as we finish up these things about kind of how to think about these things, how to take them without having to follow it as like a rule book of sorts and just more as like a guide for you.
You got to adapt it to your culture. I always say that all the time. You have to adapt it to your culture. It's going to be a little different, and you have to be who you actually are. Don't be this movie character. We look at movies. The movies are cool. There's a lot of cool leadership things in the movies. And this guy says this, that guy says that. They have some great lines and everything else. But life isn't like a movie, right? It's a little more dynamic. It's a little sloppy. It's not perfect. So don't think that you got to be this movie character. You got to be you. You can look at, I think we all have role models, right? No matter where we are, if you're just a firefighter or an officer, whatever, wherever you are, we all have people that we look up to, and we're like, man, that guy, he knocks it out of the park. He really does a good job. I want to be like that. You could be like that, but be you with some of the things they do, some of those attributes. You can't be that person. So I think if you get stuck into, I want to be a movie character, I want to be that guy that I look up to, you can come off and go down this road where you're not authentic, and it doesn't play right. So learn from other people, take that in, but do it, your way, your style. We all have our own styles, right? So, and I think you can detect that, right? You can detect that as a firefighter with officers that are kind of playing a part, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that's my take on that.
All right, cool. Well, let's go ahead and dive into these last 4 tips and kind of break them down a little bit. And the first one is be balanced. Extreme actions and opinions are usually not good.
Yeah, you don't want to jump to a decision if you have time to gather more complete information. Sometimes you have to make a decision, but a lot of times you can gather a little more information, get some opinions, and get a more balanced idea of what needs to be done. You have stuff on the fireground that you still actually may have time to gather more information. At a certain point, you don't have any more time, and you got to move forward with whatever the plan may be. But other times you can do a little recon, a little, extra size up and figure out what you want to do. Same thing on some of these EMS calls. You may want to gather more information. You know how that goes. We're talking to people, and it takes forever to sometimes get to the heart of the problem. But especially in the firehouse, with the things that you're doing in the firehouse, the way you're running the company, the day-to-day problems, the two firefighters, going back and forth with each other about nonsense, a citizen complaint, that kind of stuff. You want to gather more information and get a better picture of what's going on. And you also, when it comes to being balanced, you don't want to make statements along the lines of, we're always going to do this. There's usually, in most cases, there's an exception to the rule, right? And when you make a grand statement like, we're always going to do this, the second you don't, everyone's going to notice, right? We're always going to pull a line in this situation. And you could say, hey, most of the time we're going to pull a line in this situation. There are some exceptions. Leave yourself some wiggle room. Don't paint yourself into a corner, because especially as a leader, it just doesn't come off well. They're going to notice when you say an absolute and then, deviate from that absolute. They're going to say, well, what the heck, man? What does this guy, what does this word mean? He says he's going to do this, and then he, changes his mind day to day. So you got to be careful with that. And when you take things to an extreme level, you can put people off too. That's another thing. You can, these absolutes sometimes where you're acting like a character out of a movie. I love movies. I love movies. I love, cool movies with, leadership stuff and all that, and just fun movies in general. But we're not characters in a movie, right? Life is sloppy. Leadership sometimes is sloppy, whether we like it or not. That's just how it is. So the movie is scripted. Life isn't. You say things like, I usually want to, most of the time, stuff like that. And you can talk about some of the exceptions, or you don't have to, but you got to leave yourself ability to change course sometime in the firehouse.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of one of those things of not letting, I think people let their ego get in the way.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a term in poker when you say you're pot committed, or in it's the sunk cost fallacy, if you want to use more fancy terms for it. But
that is fancy.
Yeah, it's fancy. Sunk cost fallacy, or
wow.
I like the poker term better. You're pot committed, right? And it's when you've gone so hard on opinion that you get to a point where you're defending that opinion for the sake of defending it.
Yeah.
And you've closed yourself off. And I think that happens sometimes where we just, close ourselves down, and we find ourselves defending our ego more than an actual opinion, or we forget why we even have the opinion. And it's all about the battle to defend it. And we all have that, I mean, me, I have some strong opinions on things, but as I've gotten older and wiser, maybe, I don't know, hopefully, one of the things I try to do is use things like, if somebody's got a different opinion, or if it's something around the firehouse, I like to say things like, tell me about it. Let me hear what's going on here.
Yeah.
Let me hear this. Or if it's a tactic or something that my gut reaction is that I don't agree with it, I say, teach me. Some of these things, we have different ways of doing certain things on the Fireground, and some people have really strong opinions about it, and they kind of come at it as like, this is the way to do it, and every other way sucks. And I think we've all been there where we really feel strongly about something, but if you can just step back from your ego for a second, it doesn't mean that you have to change your mind, but just even the words you use when you talk about this stuff, tell me.
Yeah.
All right. That doesn't mean I'm going to change my mind, but tell me, let me hear, or teach me, if you like to do this tactic and I like to do this tactic, teach me your way and tell me why you like to do it. And again, that gives you a chance to step back, observe, hear some things that people are saying. And again, that doesn't mean that you have to, at the end of the day, you may stick with your decision, but you've gathered more information, you've observed, which ironically, I guess, leads into the next.
Oh, wait, real quick though.
Yeah.
You said something that was, I really like what you said. And I think that's an important point, is people sometimes get sucked into defending the idea, right? And it's tied to the ego. You're defending the idea, so you're not hearing any of the other problems that you may have not known that those were going to be problems. But now we've started this process, and now there's a problem, and you don't want to hear it because you think it's an attack on your idea. And a good leader isn't going to look at that as an attack. They're going to look at that as maybe a course correction. And that's a really good point. That is easy for all of us to do, where we're defending our idea because our ego's tied to it so much, where it's like a personal attack on us. And it's like, no, we didn't know everything. And now we know more because we actually started whatever the process is, or we started training with a new technique or a new way to deploy the hose line. And we realize, we're like, oh man, we ran this call and it didn't work out the way I thought it was going to work out. That's not an attack on your ego. That's just you being smart and open to different possibilities and saying, I need to consider that now. So I like what you said, defending that idea. Man, we got to be careful with that. Anyway, we can, I guess, move on to the next one.
Well, it is a good transition, because the next one is be decisive. When it is time to make a decision, make one.
Yeah, and I think that, be balanced and then be decisive. I think some people may see those as contradicting each other, but they're not, because sometimes you do have to make a decision and you can't waffle back and forth. You're not gonna please everyone. You got to take a reasonable amount of time to get the information, but then you got to make the decision. And there's usually going to be someone that's not going to like it all the time, and that's okay. You're not going to make everyone happy, but you should at least pay attention to the input that you're getting from people and the effect of that decision. So, like I said, you can course correct, and you can work to a point where you can make a decision. And I guess this is where I like the terminology incremental decisions. And an example of that, I guess, firefighting. Hey, we need a second line. Well, where does the second line go? Does it go to the fire floor or the floor above? I don't know at this point, but we can make an incremental decision and we can move the second line up the stairs to the fire floor. When we get to the fire floor, then we can make the next decision. What does it look like? Do they need the line on the fire floor or the floor above? So what that means is you don't have to make the whole decision at once, but you still have to be moving in the direction to get to the point where you're at the end of that journey. I don't know. Does that make sense?
I mean, it makes perfect sense. And I think that has been documented throughout history. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step, all that kind of stuff. And I think, I think I totally butchered that, but you get the idea.
Sounds good enough.
It sounds good
enough.
Close. But I mean, that's the idea, right? And it sounds simple, but I think sometimes people can get overwhelmed with the number of decisions that they know that they're going to have to make, and end up not making any of them very well because they're looking at the totality of an event as opposed to moving forward.
Yeah, and I mean, you can being decisive. You can make a decision. That doesn't mean you can't change your mind. I mean, no one wants someone that's constantly changing their mind, but you can change your mind. It's not an absolute that we're doing it this way and we're never going to change. Of course you can change. Just don't be the person that's constantly, every time someone brings something to you, you can consider it. That doesn't mean, oh, we got it. Okay, now we're going to do it this way. Cause then it's just, it gets kind of unstable and you're all over the place. And it's a poor quality to have. So be balanced.
Yeah. Look at patterns in your decision-making, whether good or bad. If there's something that you've made a decision on several times and it's worked out for you, then that kind of starts to go into the territory of something else we talked about, which is defaults. And then you can say, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do most of the time if I can. And then if something goes wrong for you, you need to look at that and kind of break it down and say, why did that go wrong? And then reassess. And then the next time, maybe your decision-making will be stronger.
Yeah.
So the next one, and we're kind of going in a different direction here with this one. Here it is. It's build relationships. That is your main goal as a leader. A team is a group of people who have relationships and trust one another. Otherwise, it is just a disconnected, incoherent cluster of people.
Yeah, it's really, I don't know, it sounds, I guess, simple, maybe silly to some people, but one of the most powerful things as a leader is the relationships you have with the people that you work with, below you, above you in the chain of command. And that takes time. That's not something that happens, overnight, immediately. And, first you need to concentrate and you need to build relationships on your shift with your firefighters. And you gotta get to know them a little. Ask them. You don't necessarily have to be best friends. I mean, it's okay. That can be a good or bad thing. Sometimes you can get. It's hard to, if you're best friends with someone, to lead them in a firehouse and be their boss and that kind of stuff. It can work sometimes. It depends on both people, and you don't have to be friends at all, but you have to build some kind of relationship, find some kind of common ground, and that could be interests in relation to the job, whatever it is, getting better at the job, or they like, working on a certain aspect of it, forcible entry or ladders or something like that. And you have a common ground where you enjoy that, or training or whatever it may be, or something outside the job. You like, same football team or whatever, a certain sport, or I don't know, you guys are in a band or you guys like bands, whatever it may be, is you got to look for some way to connect with people and build that relationship. And that's going to help you to make things smoother. Because if you know someone, you have some familiarity with them, you end up trusting them a little more. And it's just easier, those relationships in the firehouse under stress, it makes that easier. And you can kind of see that sometimes if you're working overtime somewhere, or you're detailed there for the day and you walk in and you don't really have a relationship with any of the people, it feels a little awkward, right? You're looking for that one person, right? That one dude, you're like, hey man, how you doing?
Yeah.
Because you just like
latch on to that person.
Yeah. So, I mean, you gotta build relationships on your shift, but also you gotta build relationships with the other shifts. You don't want to create too many of the, us against them kind of thing. It just, I don't know. It doesn't play well. The shift wars. I'm not a big fan of that. So you got to build relationships with the other members on the other shift, and that's going to just help the whole firehouse to be a little more relaxed. And also, if there's things that have to get done, the other shift can kind of pick it up. So you get whatever it may be. Maybe you're cleaning out a room in the firehouse. You get most of it done, and they pick it up. If you have a good relationship with that shift, that's going to go a long way. Or something, is issues with apparatus and stuff like that, you guys are working together. You're on the same team, even though you're on different shifts, trying to work to get something fixed or replaced or whatever that may be. And then from there, you also, you got to think about relationships with the other companies, so the other firehouses, whether they're in your department or it's like a mutual aid deal or something like that. It's important to have a decent relationship with them. Just think of it. I like to think of it as, if we're doing something together as far as operationally, I'm there. If they're in the lead role, I'm there to assist them. I'm going to do everything I can to help them out, so they know they can count on me. And then hopefully that reciprocates, and then they're going to help me out. I'm not trying to step on them and crush them. And I'm not saying don't have friendly competition, right? We all there's some companies that are right down the street, and you have that friendly competition. That's cool. That's a good thing. That's a good motivator. But ultimately, you're on the same team at the end of the day. So don't let that get so carried away that's detrimental to actually providing the services we're supposed to provide to the community. So that's. And, that goes a long way with mutual aid too, because a lot of times if you have a mutual aid situation, you don't know those people at all. So that takes a little more effort. Really reach out, introduce yourself, and do the same stuff you would do with the other firehouses in your department, if that's the case. And I guess the last one that I think can be more complicated is up the chain of command, especially, I can think of an officer to battalion chief that's a little more complicated sometimes, building those relationships. But you gotta do that, because you're always trying to build trust with people that you can be dependent on. So a big part of that I think of is, if, my battalion chief counts on me to do all the the little stuff. So if I'm making sure we're getting the reports done or whatever other administrative tasks, like again, the easy wins, as I like to call it. If I can get that stuff done, as painful as some of the admin can be, that's going to help me out when we're on the scene of a call or something like that. And also when it comes to operationally, if I do what I'm supposed to do, if I'm the third due engine and I do what I'm supposed to do as the third due engine, those responsibilities, that chief then can count on me. And that actually helps with building the relationship, not just, talking, but doing what you're supposed to do is all part of that. So it's my take on that.
All right. And that brings us to our last tip for new leaders from Jocko Willink. Lastly, get the job done. That is the purpose of a leader, to lead a team in accomplishing a mission. If you don't accomplish the mission, you fail as a leader. Performance counts.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds a little obvious, right?
Yeah.
Is it though? I mean, do we do it all the time? I mean, why are we there? To run calls, train, everything else is a detail is the way I look at it. Those are the details. We're there to run the calls, train, to be ready to run the calls, and then we got to do the other stuff. Yes, we got to do the other stuff, but we got to get the job done. And I remember this put it in perspective for me a little, is when I was a rookie riding around, officer, I guess I think we were going to a training or something, or whatever it was, some kind of event or something along those lines. A call came out close by, and I guess if we took the call, we weren't actually on it, but we were in a better spot to take it. If we took the call, we were going to be late to the training or whatever. And he's like, "Why are we here? We're here to run calls." So we jumped on it, and I was like, that really put it into perspective for me when I was a younger firefighter. I was like, "Oh yeah, of course that makes sense." Sometimes that's not always the case, though. Some people don't quite understand that. The reason the fire department exists is to run the calls, help people with emergencies. That's why we are here. All the other stuff that we do, that's cool. But if we're not doing that, we're not really a true value to the community, because that's what they really count on us for. So we're there to get the job done. And, you want to use your skills as a leader to make the company better, but you don't want to pound your chest about it. So you want to get the job done. And when you're in that role as a leadership role as an officer, or maybe a more senior firefighter, you want to guide them in the right direction, but you don't want to pound your chest about it and say, "I did this, I got us to the right place because I jumped in, I took control of the situation." People are going to figure that out. So don't pound your chest and say, "Look at me." Focus on getting it done, and all that other stuff will take care of itself.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good way to round it out there, because I know a lot of these things are kind of vague, and
Yeah.
and it's tough. And I think that's good to bring it home with, at the end of the day, all of the stuff that we're talking about is actually about getting the job done better. It's about making the firehouse run smoother. It's about making the calls run better. It's about improving your decision making.
Yeah.
It's about improving your relationships. All of the stuff that comes into play when you put a bunch of humans doing a relatively important thing together, and you get personalities involved and all of that. And then the thing about it is that we all know we love this job. We love having the meaning of having a job like this and doing it with all of the personalities that we run into, and that's what makes it great. As a leader, though, you are no longer just the dancer in the dance. You are now kind of conducting the dance.
Yeah.
And it can turn into chaos if you don't have a light touch on it. So a lot of this stuff we talked about, is about having that light touch and guiding the dance of this beautiful thing that we call the fire department. And but at the end of the day, this last one, get the job done, that's what it's all about. That's what we're here to do. And that's what all of this stuff we talk about is ultimately in service of, is getting the job done. So it's better for us doing it. We enjoy it more. There's more buy-in. Things run smoother on the Fireground and at the Firehouse. And ultimately that we are in a better place to do our job and serve the public.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing I was thinking about this as you were talking, and we talked about this previously, not on the podcast, but and this goes back into the relationship thing because it's one of the most powerful things to for a group and leadership and all that to work right. Is I remember you saying something about, and we're both bad with names, but you were saying using people's names. There's something to that. And there really is. Like if you say someone's name, it can break, a tense moment sometimes, or just if you see someone on scene and they say your name. I mean, it's funny. I don't know. I just thought that was like a little important thing to bring up.
Let me return to that for a second as we bring this thing to a close here. But I just want to say, I am, I guess, an introvert by nature. So this whole podcasting thing and talking to people, and it doesn't really come naturally to me. Now you put me at home with a family, and I consider the guys at the Firehouse a family. Totally different thing, right? But there's anybody who knows, and we've been around firefighters from a lot of different departments and stuff. Some of these guys are such characters, and it's a beautiful thing. And the bullshitting and the banter that firefighters can perform is next level. I mean, like truly raised to the level of an art, and I love it, but it doesn't necessarily come naturally to me. I'm more of a at home with my tribe kind of guy. Yeah. And the reason why I say that is because I know that there are some officers who are getting promoted that, and firefighters too, this applies across the board, that maybe are in my shoes, right? Where you may not be the big bold guy. We all love the big bold characters, love them, but it might not come naturally to you. And so that's where this tip comes in. If I could tell you one thing, if you're not necessarily, great at building those relationships and, the banter and everything, learn somebody's name. It's a great, easy tip. And again, like you said, I'm bad with names, but I make a point to try to learn people's names, because if you can start with, hey Johnny, hey Tom, how you doing? Whatever. It just starts the whole thing off. And if you just need like a practical tip, like, okay, how do I build relationships? Here's a simple thing: learn somebody's name. It's easy. And I was telling you the other day, just as experience, it works right back at you too. We were on a fire call, and there was a mutual company that was walking up. It was a rescue company, and they were all walking by, and I'm standing by a hydrant at secondary water, and I'm just kind of hanging out there, and I hear one of the guys say, "Hey Clint, what's up, dude?" And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." He knows who I am. So you can give that same thrill to somebody else just by learning their name. Especially, it really works with the mutual companies and stuff, because it's like, wow, they went out of their way to learn, because we know a lot of the guys in our own department.
I almost think it works more the less familiar you are with a person, like the mutual aid companies or companies you don't see much. When they say your name, it's a weird thing, but it almost is more powerful, because you're like, oh, they know my name, they know my first name,
I told you there's a book that I told you about earlier that I think a lot of people have heard of, but if you haven't, you should check it out, because it's an old book. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. I believe the author is Dale Carnegie, and I mean it's like one of those like super classic, iconic books. But
I've heard a lot of people reference that.
It's a great book. It's a great book in terms of just kind of these really super practical things that you can do to just kind of interact with people. And one of the things he says in there is basically, a person's name is the sweetest sound that they'll ever hear. And that sounds stupid, but it's true.
Some truth, yeah, for sure.
So it immediately establishes this familiarity. So again, there's a lot of things you can do, but learn people's name, call them by name, and that's going to get that relationship building started on the right foot.
Yeah, and I want to take that just a little deeper, because I was again thinking about that as you're talking, and the weird thing about, if you're not as familiar with someone, people you don't run with as much, but they say your name. There's a weird, I don't know if you noticed it, where you don't want to let them down. You know, I think I've talked about this in the past, where that's one of the most powerful motivators as far as not wanting to let another firefighter down. There's something to that. And if they don't have you don't have that familiarity, but they know your name, and you just, I don't know, man, there's something there. I'm not exactly sure what it is, how it works, but you're like, I don't want to let these people down. They know my name. I don't know. It's like, I don't know. It's a silly thing, but I don't know. I've just feel that. I don't know if you've ever felt that. Whatever. I mean, there's something to it.
It becomes personal, you know, and so you have that personal responsibility to that person now.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I hope everybody listening got something out of this, and kind of take all 3 of these episodes as a whole. It, you know, covers some common ground across the episodes. The book by Jocko Willink it's a lot. This is, I mean, what, literally a page in the book, maybe 2 pages.
Maybe like 2 pages, maybe 3, something like that.
So it's a small part of the book, and I think we may dive deeper into it because it really is a good leadership text. But for now, this is the 12 tips on how to succeed as a new leader. And we've kind of gone into some stuff, and I hope it was useful for everybody. And like Cap said, you know, you take it, you don't take it as gospel. You take it as what can I get out of this? What can I use from this? How can I work this with what I've got at my firehouse in my fire department and make it make sense for me? You know, if you even got one of these tips and you're like, yeah, that I need to work on that, you know, it exposed a blind spot or something like that, then that's great. So otherwise, I think that's all for today's episode.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so yeah, if it's not helpful, whatever.
Yeah. But thanks for listening.
Yeah. Thanks for your service. Check us out at firegroundcompany.com. You'll find links to all our social media accounts and our YouTube channel, and you'll stay up to date on everything we're working on. We also have a store on our website where you can support us as we grow this community, plus working on some great courses to help you strengthen your leadership in the fire department and support its traditions and culture. Last but not least, subscribe to the podcast, give us a rating, leave a comment, spread the word, get this out to the firefighters who are hungry to make the job even better.
The Fireground Company Podcast.